guys, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about the 2 books that I read this month by Alyssa Cole as part of my Black Authors Matter month, where I'm reading a lot of books by Black authors. She is a romance author. Now, I do want to say this. I'm starting to dip my toes a little bit into the romance genre. This is not something that I typically read a lot of. However, I had heard Squibbles Reads, who I really like, and some other booktubers talk about these books, and they really piqued my interest, so I decided to pick them up, and I'm glad I did. However, I do want to say, especially for my younger viewers, or for, any of you really, do be aware that her books do have a handful of scenes with sexually explicit content in them, so if that's not something that you want to read or that interests you, these are probably not something you're going to want to pick up. On the flip side of it, these are not erotica in any way. They're pretty plot heavy, and so that is what I'm going to talk about, but just kind of disclaimer there that that is something that is present in these books. They are adult romance novels. So without further ado, let's talk about the 2 books. They're very different books. One of them is a historical romance, one of them is a contemporary romance. I did like both of them, although in different ways and to different degrees. So I think what I'm going to do is talk to you about each of the book individually and then do a little bit of compare and contrast, because I think that is sort of interesting as well. The 2 books that I'm going to be talking to you about today are An Extraordinary Union, and I will put a picture right here. I got it out from the library and had to return it, so I don't have it with me, but this is book 1 in a historical romance series set during the Civil War. The other book that I'm going to be talking to you about is A Princess in Theory. This just came out last month, and this is book 1 in a contemporary series called the Reluctant Royals series. Okay, so first let's talk about An Extraordinary Union, because you guys, this book kind of blew me away. I think I gave it 5 stars. It was at least 4.5 stars, and for a romance novel to do that, like, it's doing something really, really right. And I don't just mean with the romance. This book was amazing. And, it's a tricky thing to write, to be honest. It could have been really weird, but it wasn't. It was so, so good. So An Extraordinary Union, like I said, it's a historical romance novel set during the Civil War, and the main character is a former slave. She has an eidetic memory, which means that she can remember perfectly anything she hears or reads, and so she actually goes back to the South and poses as a slave to be a spy for the Union, which is kind of amazing. The other cool thing about it is that she's actually based on a real historical figure, so this book was very well researched, and there actually was a woman with an eidetic memory who was placed in the Southern White House as a spy. Yeah, anyway, so that's amazing. That I thought was really cool. So in terms of the romance, she ends up developing a relationship with another spy, and he is white. So this could have been really problematic or really weird, but it wasn't. It was really, really well done. I mean, not only the fact that they have like very clear chemistry, but she really gets into things like power dynamics in relationships, and man, it was good. And it was just like fascinating to me too, because she talks about like power dynamics for women in general, but more specifically for women of color, especially during that time period. And I thought that it was just so well done. There was this like push and pull of like they're attracted to each other, there's chemistry, there's interest, but she is also very resistant to it because of those racial dynamics and because of the power dynamics that come into play there. And so I thought that that was really, really well done. I mean, of course, love sort of wins the day in the end, but it's not easy or simple, and it was very, very well thought out. And the love interest is also just this really great guy who sort of comes to realize a lot of things. The other thing that I thought was really interesting that she gets into here is the fact that during this time period, not all abolitionists believed in things like racial equality. They had a lot of different reasons for maybe wanting slavery not to exist, but they weren't all these amazing, great people as we sometimes make them out to be. And so she did a really good job of sort of unpacking some of those things and unpacking the fact that like while our main character has an eidetic memory, she's also just really, really smart and really brave and kind of a badass and awesome. But she, in some ways, even as a spy, is treated a little bit like a parrot. Like the only thing she's good for is to memorize things and send them back, not to actually do analysis or know what to think about things. So I don't know. It's very interesting in terms of those dynamics. And there's also this sort of strong storyline of they're both placed in the house of this sort of big guy in the South who's involved in the military and involved in politics, and there are some things happening there in terms of intrigue and important information that they need to get back that could turn the tide of the war. So it's really good. There's all this sort of external conflict happening. There's some really interesting ways of dealing with the dynamics of that relationship, and there's also this, you know, fairly steamy romance between these pair of people. So yeah, I was just kind of blown away. I went in thinking, okay, this is going to be interesting. I was not expecting her to do so much, and the book is short, you guys. It's like 250 pages long, but man, does it pack a punch. Was so impressed. I definitely want to continue on with the series. I think there are potentially some other characters that could be interesting to learn a little bit more about. I love the fact that it was so well researched, it was so feminist. And one thing that I will say that in both of her books I really, really love, and again, like, I don't know how prevalent this is because this is not a genre that I get into. I'm pretty careful about what I read in terms of romance, but when it does come to the sex scenes and the more explicit content, one thing that I love about it is that there is a very sort of feminist leaning in the way that those are written, because there is very much a focus on the female experience and on the importance of female pleasure. I mean, mutual, yes, it's not like all about the woman, but there is a heavy focus on that, which I think is a really important thing, and that is the thing that I'm beginning to understand can make these sort of romance novels kind of revolutionary in some ways. I mean, it shouldn't be revolutionary, but you know, it kind of is. And so I think that that's important. I love that the men that she writes are, you know, like, they're masculine and everything, but they're also thoughtful and not just concerned about themselves. And I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so it's an interesting thing. So I was a huge, huge fan of this book. I thought it was amazing. So if you are not uncomfortable with the explicit material in this, I would highly recommend that you pick it up, because I just was really, really impressed with it. Even if you don't typically read romance, like, this would be one to read. It's really good. Okay, so let's talk about A Princess in Theory, because this was a very, very different book, and I did still enjoy it, but it didn't wow me the way that An Extraordinary Union was. So the premise of A Princess in Theory is our main character is in grad school for epidemiology. She's a scientist, which props for that, right? You've got a woman in STEM, a woman of color in STEM, which is fantastic. So she is in STEM. She has aged out of the foster care system, which, you know, also very impressive that she's doing what she's doing. And she keeps getting these emails that she thinks are spam, telling her that she is betrothed to an African prince. Except it turns out that she actually is. And so he goes to New York to find her, but doesn't tell her who she is when they meet. So things happen. In some ways it's like this Cinderella-ish story. The premise of it I thought was really interesting, which is why I picked it up in the first place. And there's a lot to like here. She gets a little bit into things like the fact that women in STEM fields are often not treated as competent as their male colleagues, particularly women of color in STEM fields, and I love that she kind of addresses some of that. There's a lot of science stuff in here. I'm not so familiar with epidemiology, so but I think if you are, you would probably appreciate it. I was actually looking at it, and it's interesting because Alyssa Cole, the author of these books, is also a science writer, which I think is kind of interesting. So she does have some background in science, and you definitely see that bleed in here. She also touches a bit on things like the foster care system and poverty and colonialism and like resource management, like in terms of natural resources and how that impacts environmental issues. So I thought that was really cool. I will say that those themes were not leaned into as heavily as I might have liked them to be in this book. I think there could have been more of that. It was definitely more focused on the romance between our two main characters than it was on those other issues. And so I wish there had been more of it. I still think that was really great that those themes were there at all. I do have a thought on why that might be true. This was published by Avon Books, so this is definitely a more mainstream publisher, whereas An Extraordinary Union was published by more of an indie publisher. So it's possible that it's a branding and marketing issue in terms of why in this book there's a little bit less focus on the more serious themes. They're still there, they're good, but I sort of wish we'd seen more of them. Okay, so on to the relationship. The prince, the Bizo, he sort of grew on me, things I liked about him, but like, I don't know. Their relationship sort of came together a little bit faster than is my taste. I think I'm more a fan of the slow burn romance where they don't sort of like get physical right away. I may be in the minority. In this book, I felt like it kind of happened faster. I mean, obviously that's part of why it became an issue, that she didn't know who he really was, and you know, that kind of plays into things later on, so I kind of understand where it's coming from, but like, I was like, oh, okay, like, I kind of wish it would had like taken a little bit longer, but you know, that's me. That's like totally a personal preference. I did like it. You know, the romance part of it, I liked the story. I thought it was cute. It was interesting. I actually loved some of the side characters, so I do think I'll probably continue the series. Especially the prince's assistant is this really, really awesome character, and she is actually queer, but she's just like snarky and on top of things, and I really like her, and so I'm kind of hoping we'll get to see more of her in future books because I really enjoyed her. There's a lot of interesting side characters. I thought the cultural stuff was really interesting. Yeah, it was good. I thought it was a really good book. It was really solid romance novel. I think I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The other one was like amazing and highly recommend it. This one I think deals with some really important themes. I think it's a great thing to have out there. I do think it's really fun, and if you like romance novels, it's worth picking up. So there you go. So this is me sort of stepping into this world. Like I said, I'd been hearing a lot of people recommend Alyssa Cole as a writer, and I was really intrigued by the premise of her book, so I decided to pick up a couple this month, and I'm really glad I did. I think I'm going to read more of her, honestly, and they're pretty fun and quick to get through, but I love that she weaves in these really important issues. Yeah, anyway, if you have read any of these, or if you have any thoughts on anything I said, please talk to me in the comments down below. I would love to chat about these. If you have not checked her out, definitely do, because I think she's really good. One thing I want to say that I think is kind of interesting actually though is I don't read a lot of romance in general, but prior to this, I don't think I'd ever really thought about picking up a romance novel by an author of color. And I was thinking about it and thinking, okay, why is that? That's really interesting to me, right? That these markets tend to be really segmented. I even know in another city that I used to live in, I don't think this is so much true in New York, but my last library, near the romance books, they had an entire section that was all just like African American romance, but it had got its own section, and like, I don't know. It's just interesting to me. So the reason is that I'd heard a lot of different people talking about Alyssa Cole. Her books sounded really interesting. I'm glad I picked them up. They're really well written and they're really great books. But I feel like it would be great if we had more authors of color in this genre be more mainstream, where more people are reading their books than just other people of color, because like, to be fair, sometimes I think those books are written specifically for those audiences, and I think that's fine. But I also feel like maybe the market shouldn't always be quite so segmented. Just a thought. I think it's interesting. Like I said, I'm relatively new to the genre. I don't know a lot about it, but just coming into it, those are some of my thoughts. Talk to me in the comments down below what you guys thought. If you've read these books, if you're interested in these books, any thoughts about this whole issue of race and the romance genre. I would be really curious to hear what you guys think. Yeah, if you guys like this video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.